This shows an assortment of tools you need on an installation on a job. Now let's take a look at the primary tools. One of the items you're going to need is a level to ensure that your wall bracket is hanging level on the wall for the wall mount units. And you're also going to need a good flaring block. You're also going to need a flaring size gauge. You'll need a good tubing cutter and a good deburring tool. You're also going to need a vacuum pump. You'll also need a good digital refrigerant scale. Next, you'll need a good set of torque wrenches. You'll need a dedicated set of refrigerant manifold gauges. You'll need a good nitrogen regulator, a micron vacuum pump gauge. You'll need a bottle of nitrogen and R410A refrigerant. One thing to consider when unpacking your single split outdoor unit is you have a drain plug for the heat pump models to get your defrost water away from the condensing unit. So make sure you don't throw it away with your packing materials. Once you've decided on a proper location for your outdoor unit and you've unpackaged the unit, make sure you're using the lifting handles which are available on both sides for properly moving the unit so you don't damage your hands. So once the unit location has been decided and you follow the instructions in your installation manual on service requirements and things, to access the refrigerant piping and your electrical connections, just remove the one screw, slide this panel down, and move it away from the unit. The next phase of your installation process is preparing your piping. You'll need to measure the distance between your outdoor unit and your indoor unit, and you'll have to insulate both pieces of copper. Make sure you keep the cap on your refrigerant lines. You don't want talc powder or pieces of insulation getting into your system. One of the critical things to think about after you cut your tubing is making sure you deburr the copper properly. So you'll have a good fit on the flare and make sure you don't have any pieces in the copper piping. One of the things always to remember before you start your flaring is to put the flare nut on the copper. Once you get your piping into your flaring block, you're going to use your flare size gauge to set the depth of the copper in the flaring block. So now you're going to create your flare with an approved offset flaring block with a clutch so you won't over tighten the flare, but it's recommended you tighten and untighten it twice to make sure you have a good smooth flare. Once you have your flare created, you want to make sure you have the right size flare for the R410A. So you want to make sure it's not going completely through your flare size gauge, as if it's a proper flare, it's going to stop halfway through the gauge. Before proceeding, you want to take a little bit of oil and put it on the back side of the flare and a little on the face of the flare to ensure a good seat. You want to take care not to get any inside of your piping. Now it's time to attach your tubing to your unit. Daikin recommends tightening your flare nuts up to a specific torque setting. Always use a backup wrench when you're using this so you don't damage the internal valve. If you're purchasing the adjustable torque wrenches from Daikin, we'll give you a chart that tells you the foot-pounds per torque based on the copper size that you need for your equipment. With this one, you'll back the nut and the handle off. You'll be able to adjust the handle to the foot-pounds you need and then tighten the nut back up and you'll be good to go. To access your electrical connection there behind this panel, it's easily accessible by removing two screws. So when it's time to hook your electrical connections up, you use the right gauge wiring. You've got L1, L2 and your ground for your power supply coming in. When it's time to hook up your indoor unit, you've got 4 wire connection in here. 1 and 2 is your power, 3 is your communication, and the 4th wire is your ground. You have to ensure that the same wires that you're connecting, the same color-coded wires on the outdoor unit are matching your indoor unit. You cannot have any breaks in your number 3 and your ground, or you will wind up with a communication error between your indoor unit and your outdoor units. Your single split ductless system will arrive in 2 boxes. Your wall mount unit will be in the rectangular of those 2 boxes. Now we're going to look at unpacking the unit. To start the removal of the case on your unit, you'll have to open your front flap and remove the screws. You'll need to retain these screws when you reinstall the cover. Depending on the capacity of the unit, you may not only have screws here holding the case in, but you may also have some under the louvers. you'll have to remove these as well. Once you've got the screws removed from the cover, you'll close the flap back and need to position it so you can release the latches in the back of the cover. Once you've released the clips in the back, you'll need to roll the unit onto its back and roll the cover off. Take care in not damaging the louvers as you remove the cover. Once you remove the cover, you'll have to turn the unit back over face down so you can take the retaining screw that holds on the bracket for the mounting. Once you remove the retaining screw, you'll have to release the clips on the back of the unit, holding the bracket in place. When securing the mounting plate to the wall, make sure the wall will support the weight of the unit, and for your convenience, we have multiple mounting holes available to you for mounting the plate to the wall. When you're ready to place your wall bracket on your wall for mounting your indoor unit, pay close attention. There are 2 tabs on here for putting your torpedo level on, so you can make sure you're leveling it properly on the wall. Once you get it leveled, you can take a pen or a pencil and mark some holes where you're going to put your mounting. So make sure you're using an appropriate anchor for holding your bracket on the wall. It's important to anchor this on the edges so it doesn't fold in or roll in away from the wall, so it'll stay flat on the wall. One thing to note, you see the knockouts on the side so you can take your refrigerant piping out the corners. When you're doing your holes for your drain, you want to make sure you're angling your hole downward so the water's flowing away from the unit. One thing to pay attention to when you're hanging your unit on the bracket, make sure you're lining it up with the top and clipping it into the spots on the bottom. When hanging it on the bracket, you need to make sure when you push it toward the wall that it snaps into place on both sides. Your next step in your indoor unit installation is putting your wiring in. The wiring terminals are hidden behind this cover with 1 screw. And as within your outdoor unit, you've got 4 connections in here. Your power on 1 and 2, 3 is your communication line, and 4 is your ground. So they need to correspond with the same numbers you have on the outdoor unit. Once you've decided how you're piping your condensate out of your indoor unit, you need to take and put a little bit of water in the drain pan so you can make sure you don't have any leaks in your water line. One thing to note when you're getting ready to install your wall mount and the location of it, you have multiple knockouts where you can bring the refrigerant piping and your condensate lines out of the indoor unit. When you're ready to install the cover back on the indoor unit, make sure you roll it back on like you did when you took it off so it's not interfering with the louvers on the bottom of the unit. One final step when you get the cover back on the indoor unit is make sure you replace the screws that you took out of it that were securing it to the indoor unit. Then cover it up and start your operation. So now once you've got your wiring, your piping done, and units installed and ready to go, now it's time to turn it on and enjoy.
By following the instructions in this video and referring to your instruction manual for specific details, You are now ready to install a Daikin split system. If you would like to learn more about Daikin single and multi-split systems, gain a better understanding of how to install, commission, service, and troubleshoot Daikin equipment, please visit us at www.daikinuniversity.com